summoned you here for a purpose.
TransformYourGame.net.
Welcome back, everyone, to part 2, the first episode of the Transform Your Game podcast. In part 1, we spoke at length through the roster of characters revealed most recently. If you want to hear our review and analysis of those previews, go ahead and listen to that. As for now, we're going to dive into the non-character cards, the stratagems, and following the battle cards. Starting with stratagems. Metallic Kato's Stance is the first card I wanted to go through as far as the stratagems go. And Kent, you gave us a big lore lesson on Bludgeon in part 1. You want to go over the stratagem as well?
Sure. So another thing about Bludgeon is he has dedicated his life to the Melikato martial art or whatever it is. He lives by the blade, dies by the blade. Anyways, 1 star, as all stratagems are, at least at this point. When your Bludgeon Electric Warrior attacks and you do not flip a battle card that has more than 1 battle icon, put one of the cards you flipped into your hand after the battle.
Okay, so I think the stratagem is hugely powerful. I think the real cost of it is actually not the star. I think the cost of playing this stratagem is having to put Bludgeon in your deck. I don't mean that as like a joke. I'm sincere. I think Bludgeon is a medium plus character, maybe. He's 11 stars for like an okay ball of stats. He's mostly defensive. On his bot mode, his most attacking mode, he's got okay attack and a really interesting ability, but he's the wrong combat tag for most of the direct damage. I do think that this card, the stratagem, you can play with a deck that's either built around the front or the back mode, interestingly enough. So I am interested to see what the ruling is on this card about like double pip cards. Look at Handheld Blaster and like Peace Through Tyranny, that kind of stuff. I have no idea how it interacts with those because they only have 1 battle icon, like in terms of like uniqueness, but they have 2 actual pips. You guys have any idea on how that works?
I would guess that it means that the card has to have 1 pip on it. Like Handheld Blaster would make this card not trigger. So to go along with what you're saying, I think the actual cost of this card is that you don't get to play any double pip cards in your deck if you want this card to actually mean anything when you attack with Bludgeon. So I think that the most effective use of this card would be to play it with or to play it intending to always be in his bot mode so that you can continually fill your hand with direct damage so that you're continually debuffing your opponent's bots by one defense.
Yeah, I'll buy that. That seems actually pretty good to me. This is a really massive card advantage engine. The first thing that comes to my mind is like green pips are maybe the most powerful pip in the game at this point. They just grant so much utility. I think that basically putting a functional green pip on every card, if you're not playing any actual green pips in your deck, means that like there's a lot of utility to this. This is a very unique effect. We haven't seen anything really like it thus far. I'm a little bummed that it only triggers on attacks and doesn't trigger on battles. I would love to see maybe the tough come into play if we're going to play on that mode to help you dig deeper towards something. But I'm not sure it'll see much play personally, but I do think it's a really unique effect.
If I was to play Bludgeon, this is the stratagem would be the reason, but I don't really think I'm going to be playing Bludgeon all too often, so...
Fair enough.
Yeah.
All right, Resilience is kind of like the next newish stratagem we've seen, and you played alongside the 5-star we talked about in part 1, Brawn, and it's a stratagem for 1 star, which, again, all of them are right now, and it says when your Brawn Demolitions defends, he gets plus defense until end of battle equal to the attacker's bold total.
I'm not the most excited about this card. It is a common stratagem, and I understand where it could, come into play. But unless you're just facing a crazy, bold-focused deck and you're running Brawn starting, I don't know. I don't know that I would actually be using this card that often.
I like the way they designed this card because it basically makes him 6 stars, but you still get to trigger his abilities more often because he is technically a 5-star character. But just adding an additional star gives him this additional defensive ability, which actually isn't all too bad. I mean, +1 defense against airstrike with General Optimus. I mean, I think that's pretty decent for 1 star. I don't know how decent that'll be, but I think it will still see play. It just will be a little more meta dependent.
Yeah, I think to make this card more useful in competitive play, it would need to say if your team started with Brawn Demolitions in play, then this happens for your defenders because he has to be the one defending, and he is only a 5-star character. He only has 9 health. This really isn't going to last very long if you're making him in effect a meat shield for the rest of your characters, even if he's getting extra defense for their bold.
I will say this: I'm pretty interested in this card against in for one specific reason, which is that I think this stratagem is only really useful against certain archetypes. So one of the big things that's come up when people are talking about stratagems is how are they going to work with sideboarding? And given that this card is like very particular in what it's actually effective at like beating or helping you beat, it makes me wonder. Like it brings up that question again. Like I would love to see this card in a sideboard of a deck that already wants Brawn, right? That maybe is playing a star card that it could board out for a card that doesn't cost a star, and instead they bring in this stratagem against some of the more aggressive decks. I don't honestly know what that would look like or what a metagame where that's sculpted out would be, but I do think it's really interesting that this card exists in that deck construction option is available. I also love incentives against just playing the highest bold and tough numbers that you possibly can. So more multicolored pip and less bold and tough. I'm proud of this card for existing.
Yeah, really elegant design.
That's a better way and more concise way to say what I said. Thank you. Kai, since you've got the silver tongue over there, you want to talk about saturation bombing?
All right, so saturation bombing works with a Windsweeper air defense. It's a 1-star, and once per game when you flip your Windsweeper air defense to alt mode, and he has a number of damage counters equal to or greater than the number of enemies on the battlefield, move 1 damage counter from him to each enemy, and then you flip the stratagem. So if your Windsweeper is getting 2 damage, then you just flip him over to alt mode, and then you get to heal him. This seems really good for 1-star.
Yeah.
Is this a must happen? Because part of the effect from Windsweeper is that you can move 2 damage to a defender when you attack, and I would hate to think that at some point this might accidentally remove your ability to do that.
Based on wording, I believe it is mandatory.
Yeah, I think so too.
That's a really good point, but it does have to be damage equal or greater than the number of enemies on the battlefield.
Yeah, I'm actually wondering whether or not like this is intended to work when your opponent has like 3 guys, so it would be more damage than you'd be moving the other way anyhow. I really like the design space of these consumable stratagems.
Love it.
I think they're really interesting and they're super powerful. I really like Windsweeper. He's a really interesting card. This would take him from 10 to 11, right? If you're going to play the stratagem.
Yep.
That doesn't remove your ability to play 4 wide with him. It does mildly restrict what other like plane partners you can play. Like you couldn't play saturation bombing and the full set of Sky Shadow, right? Like it would cut you off there. But I don't know. I'm interested. I don't know exactly what it looks like again because it's such a weird card, but
this seems like one of the first cards that the first stratagems that's not the only way that you would want to play the card. Like it was discussed that these cards were these stratagems were adjustments to older bots that might not have seen a lot of play, like Orbital Strike or Cambion Toughness or something like that, to try to make the card more desirable to play. And you would still want to play Windsweeper without this card if you didn't feel like you needed this effect. Whereas I believe Windblade Combiner Hunter has seen absolutely 0 play. And I'm not sure that the stratagem actually helps that card either. We could talk about that stratagem later.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I actually think it's a really interesting point you bring up. A lot of them have seen kind of like strict upgrades, whereas this really does seem just like a slightly different angle. I don't know. I'm interested to see if it comes up. And I think the next one we want to talk about is Sky Shadow Sync, right? So we did mention Sky Shadow earlier, one of the most powerful characters, in our opinion, of the spoiled set so far. And the actual text on it says you play it with Sky Shadow. And it's when your Sky Shadow tank or Sky Shadow plane is KO'd and you have Ominous outside the game, combine them all into Sky Shadow Elite Warrior with Ominous in head mode. And then, I'm going to be honest, I thought you flipped this once you did that, but it seems like you don't. So this does stay face up. I don't know that it particularly matters. But yeah, I mean, I think this card along with the other ones is 15 because you don't actually have to put Ominous in your sideboard, right?
Correct.
Like it just gets to live outside the game in the way like the Metroplex underlings do.
Oh my gosh, I'm really excited for this card. Like I was already excited for Sky Shadow, and now this. Oh my gosh, basically it reduces his cost. Instead of 14 stars with the plane in the tank, then plus the 3 stars of the head, you basically pay 1 star for the head. And then he gets to combine it. This is really, really cool. I cannot wait to sleeve up a deck and play with this.
Well, yeah, it also gives the guaranteed damage of the Pierce 4. It combines and does 3 damage to an Autobot, so we're talking about a guaranteed 7 damage. And on top of that, I just got to say, Ominous has the coolest mohawk of any of the Headmasters so far. Or, I'm sorry, Titan Masters.
Yeah. No, I agree on the Mohawks. I was looking through those earlier, and you're right. There's no real argument. There's not even really a second place in my opinion. It's just like first place and then the mob. I think that kind of concludes. Unless you guys have any other thoughts, we could talk about Sky Shadow for hours, right?
Yeah.
But I think that's all of the kind of like most recent stratagems, and it's time to move on to La Battle cards. I know the one that I really wanted to talk about first was actually Master of Metallicato. I have no idea if I'm pronouncing that right. Honestly, it's probably wrong. Master of Metallicato is an action. It's got 3 hybrid pips on it, which is really interesting. So it's got an orange for specialists, it's got a black pip for ranged characters, and it's got a blue pip for melee characters. Now, it's important to note that this hybrid pip mechanic we talked about earlier is something where like it only counts for a battle effect for characters that have the tag that matches the symbol within the pip. But the actual pips themselves, it still counts as if you flipped a blue pip for some of the effects like, say, Slipstream's bot mode, where it cares about if you flipped pips of 3 different colors or grapple or something like that. And the actual ability says, choose one of your characters. When it attacks this turn and you flip battle cards, it gets +1 attack until end of battle for each different color among battle icons you flipped, which I think is really awesome. And it means this is a card that you actually don't mind playing despite or flipping.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like this is relevant for the Titans Metroplex and Fortress Maximus as well. It may not give them the attack or defense or pierce bonus when they flip it, but helps them trigger their special abilities that make them so unique and so powerful. Also, what a great card to play. Also, with your mixed pip decks and such like that. I think it's very, very powerful. We're going to see this pop up in a lot of different decks in the Wave 5 meta.
Yeah, like it's pretty easy, I think fairly easy to get to +3 because if you're playing a blue deck, for example, it's not uncommon that you'll flip blue and green and maybe a white. So, I mean, that's +3 for playing this card. But in the mixed pip decks, you can pretty easily get it to the +5, which if you can get to +5, then this card is like it. How consistently you can get to +5 is the power level of this card. So something like Focus, I think, would also pair really well with Metallicato.
Yeah. I mean, even if you just play this and then you flip another copy of the same card, that's already +3. If your specialist is +4 because you double count the orange.
Yep.
Oh yeah.
Well, also, I think this deck, or this card, fits into the overwhelming advantage deck very well.
Oh, yeah. I didn't even think about that. I keep forgetting about that card.
Well, Kent's always thinking about combo, so
Good point. There goes Captain Wet Blanket again.
yeah. But any deck where this action would be effective being used as an action. Also, I mean, obviously it's going to have a lot of different pips in it, so the card like lends itself to the kind of deck that you would play it in already. I mean, it's pretty obvious. As far as the Titans, I've played quite a bit of Metroplex myself. It is the strongest bot in all of Transformers TCG. My very favorite. But sometimes because you're playing so many mixed pips, he doesn't quite swing for enough power. You flip over 7 blues and 1 orange, and he just isn't dealing enough. But a card like this in there, he is ranged in both modes. So the black pip would almost always be useful because that's the one that would trigger as usable in that sort of thing. I'm not saying that that's absolutely the most competitive deck, Metroplex, but for Metroplex or for Fortress Maximus, that is the pip that would actually count in battle, would be the black pip because they're both ranged.
Are all of his little underlings ranged? I know that
Yes.
Six Gun is.
Yes.
Even the car is ranged?
The car is
Scamper?
The Scamper's ranged in bot mode, and I believe he's melee in car mode. I could be wrong.
Well, then maybe this is good in Metroplex.
Yeah.
I never really played Metroplex, so I don't have much to offer on that.
It's usable in Metroplex.
Anytime Joel ever got the Metroplex ability to fire off, it was like, whoa, this sucks. This is really bad for me. So, yeah, I think Metroplex, that along with the, lock on target, that card, yeah, Metroplex could be a thing coming up in the Wave 5 meta. So, I'd like to see him return.
All right. Well, I think we want to move on to the next card, which is Brass Knuckles. Brass Knuckles is a blue pip. It's a utility upgrade, and it grants the character it's on bold 2.
Yeah, it's another common card. I will say, like, getting bold 2 in the utility slot is something I don't think we've ever had before. I could definitely see this going into a blue-black pip focus deck. To just enable you to have those blue pips on defense, but then be able to flip enough cards on offense that the black would actually matter.
That's pretty much the home that I see it in as well, because the most consistent way you'll do damage in blue-black deck would be with a pierce weapon, so that you don't have to worry about the variants. But this being a utility means you can have that pierce weapon and the bold, so you can get the maximum amount of pierce possible in that turn.
Yeah, I think this is a really cool card. I think it's going to be awesome in limited, like in sealed.
Oh yeah.
Definitely going to look for it there. One of the biggest things that sealed hinges on is having powerful weapons. And this isn't a weapon; it's a utility, but it has an effect that's really similar to weapons, right? Like if you have any significant amount of black or orange pips in your deck, is it going to be great there? I don't know that it's going to see its way into constructed play, but yeah, interesting card. I think we have seen bold 2 on a utility. I think there's the Dino Bot specific one in Wave 1, Jaws of Steel.
Yes.
That's true. Yep.
That is true.
So I just want to make sure we are technically correct on this podcast, which is the best kind of correct, as everyone knows.
I'm going to agree with you. I don't think this is a very constructed competitive play kind of card. You only get so many things that you can do during a turn, one upgrade, one action. You can definitely do something more exciting than bold 2 in your utility slot. Just to say, with this blue pip, it doesn't really lend itself to a blue deck very much. And there's a better way to get bold 2 on your character card from backup beam with a green pip.
Yeah, actually, totally agree. I forgot about the comparison to Backup Beam, but that is kind of what it's competing with. I think the next card on our list to talk about is Electro-Optical Visor. This one was actually like just spoiled today, I think. But it's a blue pip for an upgrade. It's an armor. It's actually a Decepticon card, the first one we've talked about. And it grants a static +1 on defense. And when you put it on a Decepticon, so you can put it on anything, but when you put it on a Decepticon, your opponent reveals their hand, chooses an Autobot card from it, and scraps that card. So situationally pretty powerful, right?
Yeah, I don't know that we have a meta that's ready to see this card in competitive play quite yet, but as the years go by and the more sets come out, there will be obviously more Autobot cards, and maybe there will be a deck focused around that, and this will be a clutch card. At the time being, I can't see it doing much more than be, a limited pick for your deck if you just need a +1 armor.
It's a little too linear for what you need it to do in constructed play, and it's not above the curve. So,
True.
well, I mean, it technically is because it's a blue pip, but I mean, you're not really going to play because you want the armor. You play because you want that information, and I just don't think that's worth it, really. I'd rather just play Espionage.
This is not a very strong card, at least not at this time.
I am curious to see if it might be like a sideboard option for something like tanks in the future. The fact that they have greater access to armors because of Hunger Down is something that's always been really intriguing to me. And if this is a situationally powerful card, it might be something that they want to make use of, maybe out of the sideboard against something like a Daring Escape deck. Like Daring Escape itself is an Autobot card. Confidence is an Autobot card. There are some relevant Autobot cards that are out there, Matrix of Leadership. But I agree with you guys. I don't know that there is enough of like a density of those types of cards that are seeing play that I doubt this is going to like come into the metagame in any time soon, but it's not impossible. Okay, I think we should move on to Grav Inhibitor, which is one of the cards we got from the Toy Fair, believe it or not, like when they were kind of like shooting out all those pictures of different battle cards on Saturday. It's a black pip for an upgrade. It's a weapon. We got a lot of upgrades talking about here today. And it's Pierce 3. So it's kind of like Piercing Blaster if you had a black pip instead of a white pip.
Yeah, I really like this card. I'm glad it's common. I think black needed another weapon that is really strong like this to give Pierce to black-focused decks that maybe aren't orange. So Nova Storm, immediately comes to mind, and now she's got Pierce 5, boom. Pierce 6, really, but she only attacks for 5. And then Sound Blaster, of course, this is more fuel for him, along with the Crystal of Power, and the RR Disruptor Blade. I think that guy is ready to at least test for competitive play.
Yeah, it's simple in what it does, so, I mean, can't really hate it. It feels like it was kind of designed partly for limited, but then put on the black pip for the synergies that you guys talked about.
Sergeant Sound Blaster hasn't been very relevant to this point, but I think that this is the biggest help for it so far. Otherwise, Piercing Blaster hasn't been a very highly used card. If you're not playing Sound Blaster, I don't really think this can be a card either. Because if you're playing a deck that's Pierce centric and centered around black pips, what is Pierce 3 actually going to do for your character other than over Pierce? Hey, my character's got Pierce 9 and I'm dealing 5. I mean, it's not going to be that big of a deal if your deck is centered around black pips anyway.
That's fair. Yeah, I think Piercing Blaster is probably a stronger card if you're just going to look at it on the surface. But I am really excited for this card in Sealed and Limited. I think it's going to be incredible there. Weapons are really important. This is a common. I think that's all we have to say about it. The next card on our list is Hold the Line, which is another card from the Toy Fair. And finally another action, not so many upgrades. But white and a green, so it's a green pip. It's a secret action, and you reveal it when one of your characters defends. And when you reveal it, you repair 1 damage from the defender, and then it can't take more attack damage this battle than the number of stars the attacker has. So not only is this a green pip secret action that you can pick up, it also heals your guy, and it puts like a damage ceiling on how much damage you can take against something like the like wider aggro decks, something that has the patrols, right? So little 4-star characters swinging for 14 can't deal you more than 4, which is pretty nice.
Yeah, no more swinging for the fences with your little 4 or 5-star bot. You can deal 4 or 5, and I'm going to repair 1. Good game.
So it'll be more like 3 or 4 then, really.
Well, I think it's definitely strong in the sideboard, but one of the problems I think this game was sort of veering towards was, what do you do against the wider decks? Like, we saw wave 4 where 4 wide became incredibly common. Like, outside of the big boy control type of deck, it's almost always going to be 4 wide. So this card, I think, is a necessity to help prevent the meta from being, if I'm not wider, or if you're not wider than me, then I can just win. So it is a necessity, as much as some people are lamenting it, but yeah, very, very strong card.
Totally agree. And I actually think that while this is a tool for some of the decks to defend against some wider aggressive decks, I think that there are some other cards that have been shown thus far that give further incentive to play slightly less wide aggressive decks.
Yeah, it does feel like this set is focusing in on giving us cards that help more mid-range type decks that are, more 3 wide focused and not just 3 wide like big boy with 2 little bots on each side. And that's something that this game has kind of missed since the Wave 1 Cars deck. So I'm happy to see it.
Well, I think this is strictly a sideboard card, so I guess that's negative. I mean, I don't know.
I don't think so.
I think a good thing about this card is that it's going to give more diversity to the meta because, well, you just don't know. Are you going to play 2 tall? Are you going to play 5 wide? I mean, it's going to add some diversity because you can't just play a wide deck and overwhelm your opponent like what Kai was saying.
Yeah, I think that was relatively positive. So
Okay.
Give yourself some more credit than that.
All right, so I have a semi-wet blanket.
It's a damp. It's like damp. It's not really so much wet this time. I think the next card on the list is Junk Cannon, which, again, from the Toy Fair ones, it's an orange pip, which we haven't seen too many of. It's a weapon upgrade, and when you put it or another upgrade onto the upgraded character, that character gets +2 until the end of the turn. So it gives +2 the turn it comes in, and then that +2 falls off.
Literally, the only thing I see this doing is like you play extra padding and then you go +6, and that's cute. But that's ultimately all it is. It's cute.
Yeah, it does seem very cute. I'm not excited by this card. Again, I think it's an All-Star Unlimited, and I think if it sees play anywhere else, I would be really surprised.
Yep. Next up is Scouting Mission. Oh my gosh, I cannot wait. I love this card. It's a pep talk with a black pip, and you got to deal a damage to something. But with the Windsweeper reveal, I am very excited to try this. Also, blue-black has significantly less cards in print than orange-black, so blue-black has never really had a chance to shine. So it helps that out. I think you're going to also, rarely, but it will happen, close out a game or kill off a key character who is just staying alive at one point, and you just basically zap them, and yeah, they're gone.
Kai?
Yeah, I honestly would not be excited about this card if not for a Windsweeper, but I think it's definitely strong, especially for limited play.
Well, I don't really see the power of this card. This is another way to shut off Safeguard, as I was hating on before. Not really a big Safeguard fan. This just gives another way to do it, and I think giving your opponent two extra cards most of the time isn't that big of a deal because, as I said just a few moments ago, there's a limited a number of things you can do in a turn. You can play an action, you can play an upgrade, and if your opponent has 15 cards in their hand when you beat them, who cares?
Totally fair. I actually, the first place that I was intrigued to try this card out was, do you guys remember that like all-in system reboot deck from Wave 4? It's playing like Caliburst and Wave 1 Shockwave.
Oh, yeah.
And Fix It, and then whatever 4-star fit with the rest of those guys. So a scouting mission alongside Caliburst is deal 1 to a character, and then they draw 2 cards, and they do 1 to another one of their guys. So it's refilling their hand for them to like discard away to a reboot or something like that.
Interesting.
I also think it's really interesting in that you can use it to enable your own Energon axes. I've actually watched people do that in proxy testing already, and it seemed pretty powerful because one of the problems with Energon Axe was you kind of had like diminishing returns because it was hard to kind of get like low enough damage on your guy that you could play Energon Axe and you also wanted to play Energon Axe on them. But with this, there's actually a lot more situations where you can kind of pick and choose your spots of where you want to play that as your weapon. And the pips on it are just so good. Like flipping the pips on it is just really, really strong. I don't know what the best home for this type of thing is or how prevalent it'll be, but I actually expect this card to show up in Constructed. I just don't know if it's a topping quite card, to use Kai's verbiage from earlier. Next thing up is Temporal Quagmire, which is, I believe, maybe the last of the Toy Fair cards, but it's a blank pip secret action. You reveal it one of your characters defends, which is when most of these secret actions are revealed, to be honest with you. And it says each player can't flip more than 2 battle cards during this battle, so kind of like a Gyro Blaster, W5 Gyro Blaster on a secret action.
Thank God they made this card. Is all I could say. So I was knocked out of top 8 at Pro Play Tour Championship in Orlando by David Burgos, playing his orange, bold, black focus deck that just pierces the heck out of you. And I was playing blue controlled Jetfire, and that deck just chewed through me like I was nothing. I mean, he pierced me for 13 one time with Demolisher. He had the tank armor. Yeah, the composite armor on him, and then a supercharge and power punch, and it was ridiculous. It was insane. Oh, I put down this secret action, and that Demolisher's about to come next turn, and you're flipping 2. I'm very, very, very grateful for this card.
Kai, do you think this helps your good friend Mr. Shockwave?
Not really, no. I mean, against the orange Pierce deck, yes, but for me personally, the way I always play W5 is aggressive. I'm using it to shut off your tough, or to like it'll obviously come up against like Demolisher or Lionizer or things like that. But the way I play W5 is to be aggressive with it, not to hole up and try and defend for my life when both of us can only flip 2. So it's I think it's fine, but for me, I still prefer W5 just the way I play.
Interesting. That was not the response I was expecting, to be honest with you.
Someone else has to be a wet blanket every so often.
That's true. We can't just always leave it to Joel. Speaking of Joel, any thoughts, Joel, or do you think we kind of covered it already?
Even though it's the same, this is going to mirror the upgrade utility. I don't really like that it has blank pips. I'm not a real big fan of playing blank pips. I think that the blank makes it marginal. You can only play so many blanks in your deck unless your deck's focused on blanks, and there really hasn't been a deck that has done that yet.
Yeah.
So that makes the card kind of marginal on its own. So it's again just a sideboard card, I think, and maybe not even that.
Yeah, totally agree. I think we're going to talk about the next 2 cards in tandem. So it's Energon Mace and Trithelium Shield. They're kind of literal inverses of each other. So Energon Mace is a Decepticon card. It's a blue pip, and it's a weapon. It gives a static +2 attack, and when you can put it on anybody, but when that character attacks an Autobot, the upgraded character gets an additional +1, so it'll be +3 attack. And if that Autobot is actually a leader, you get to get Pierce 3 on top of that, so it's like situationally a better Energon Axe. And then Trithelium Shield is like the polar opposite. It's an Autobot card, orange pip, that gives +1 static defense as an armor, and when you defend against a Decepticon, you get a +1 extra defense, so +2. And if the attacking character is a Decepticon leader, you get to reduce their Pierce by 3. Kind of an interesting back and forth dichotomy between cards or duality between cards. But I figured we'd talk about them as kind of like a segment, right? Because they're a cycle. What do you guys think?
Sure, like Energon Mace, this card's going to see a lot of play. At worst, it's a primary laser. Special note, even though it's a Decepticon card and is focused against Autobots, Autobots can wear this, can use it. So if you have a mixed team of Autobot and Decepticons, worst case scenario, you can put it on an Autobot. Very, very good. Situationally better Energon Axe for Decepticons attacking an Autobot leader. The Trilithium Shield sounds like something that came out of Star Trek: The Next Generation. But I think this will also see some play too, maybe not as much, especially with our team, because we all kind of gravitate towards blue. But getting +2 defense with an orange card is pretty rare. Also, defending with anti-pierce. I'm not sure how many Decepticon leaders besides the 10-star Megatron from Wave 1 actually uses pierce. But that can be pretty key. We don't have a lot that takes away pierce, so it might have a niche following because of that.
Totally agree.
I really love Energon Mace. It is insane, quote unquote, because it's basically just another way for you to just do more damage. Because I mean, even it doesn't have the green pip, but that would just be too good, way too good. But because it starts good enough and then it only gets better. So if you're playing it as even just as a sideboard option, it's still pretty solid in that you're basically using your little guys to guarantee damage against their big boy. So very solid in that aspect. And then Trilithium Shield, I like it because it reduces the pierce, but again, we don't know how many Decepticon leaders that'll be relevant against as of right now. So it's hard to weigh in, but I do think it will see play. Maybe not this set.
Kyle, you almost said Trilithium Shield, which I think lends itself to Kent's statement about Star Trek. But the Energon Mace is, I think, just a really poor man's Energon Axe. I mean, you could put it on something that's not damaged already, but it's really just a bad Energon Axe, except in Shockwave, since it's a Decepticon card. You can put it on anything off the top of your deck, play it for free, as Kent said, +2 no matter what. The Trilithium Shield, I've really been I play blue a lot as a Transformers player, but my roots really come from Magic and playing red and green. And I'll tell you that aggressive players don't really care about defense so much. So if you're going to put this in an orange deck, I don't think that the +1 or +2 defense is really even relevant. You don't care about pierce. You're not really thinking about defense. You're thinking about attacking somebody. So if you're going to put this in an orange deck, that the defense isn't relevant. And if you're going to play it in a blue deck, why are you playing this card? There's better cards to play.
Yeah, I disagree with you on Energon Mace. I think both these cards are pretty much guaranteed to. Not pretty much guaranteed. That's hyperbole. I think Energon Mace is pretty much guaranteed to see competitive play. Trilithium Shield, maybe. I think things have to break a particular way. I think you might have to get a really good Decepticon leader in this wave for this to have relevance in the upcoming metagame. But who knows? Should one that emphasizes using Pierce. Maybe this works really well with Ominous. Maybe it's a Megatron Headmaster or Titan Master that needs Ominous as his best partner. Who knows? But Energon Mace itself, every major deck in the Wave 4 meta basically played an Autobot leader, right? The one that won the Worlds is playing Galaxy Prime. It's a blue deck. Pierce 3 +3 against that is super relevant. You look at Jetfire. Jetfire himself is a leader, and he's massively huge on defense, so the Pierce is super relevant there. If you look at even the Airstrike Patrol decks, like except for the one that played Nemesis Prime, they play General Optimus or they play Springer from Wave 4, both of whom are leaders, and they're all Autobots. All these characters are Autobots. I just think that Energon Mace has a lot of application. I wouldn't be surprised to see people kind of like split what were previously the copies of Energon Axe. Maybe they're playing 2 or 3. I wouldn't be shocked to see 2 Energon Axe and 1 Energon Mace, or 1 Energon Axe and 1 Energon Mace in people's deck lists in the coming weeks and months. All right, so we have one more card from the battle cards I want to talk about, and I kind of saved the best for last. I think you guys know what's coming. It was spoiled today. It is Belligerence, which is an orange action and is the first symmetrical effect, I believe, in the game that's maybe outside of like W5 Gyro Blaster. But it says, until end of turn, each blue either player flips during a battle is an orange instead. Take it away, guys. Take it away.
Oh my god. This card, everyone is going to want three copies of this card, probably for their sideboard. I wouldn't even be surprised if the meta ends up being blue, that people main deck, 1 or 2 copies, and then side in a third. I mean, this card in, like, say you have a Jetfire Mirror. I mean, how many tournaments are you going to walk away from and your buddy comes up and it's like, yeah, I lost the Jetfire Mirror or the General Optimus Mirror or whatever. Yeah, he drew his Belligerence and I didn't draw mine. Game over. I mean, this card is that strong, that powerful. This is one to watch for when you can influence your opponent's flips to this degree. It's gonna be nasty.
Yeah, honestly, I am both surprised and not surprised that this card was printed, because a lot of people were already exacerbated by how prevalent big boy blue decks are in the game right now, and what we've seen thus far. It seemed like that was only going to continue. So, not really surprised that orange got a good card, but I'm surprised that it's usable. That blue can also use it for the mirror. And honestly, I know I'm going to be a little salty if I lose because of this card.
Yeah,
so.
Me too.
I would not have been surprised if they made this the first SRT battle card, because this card is...
Shh, don't give them ideas.
Ridiculous. Yeah, this card is ridiculous. I mean, it's gonna swing. It basically says, if you're playing orange, hey, your opponent has no defense. Hey, if you're playing blue, every blue pip that you flip on attack means that it's 2 orange pips. I mean, this card is ridiculous. It's going to swing games like crazy. I'm glad it doesn't have a green pip.
Oh yeah, that would be bannable too. Quite bannable.
Oh yeah, for sure. This card is going to beat me a lot. As somebody who plays decks that really like to do extra padding, I'm going to be flipping a lot of blues that are actually oranges on defense when my opponents play Belligerence. Enough so that I might have to actually switch. I'm curious to see how many copies of this card end up being in the main deck of orange decks in the coming meta. I don't know that you can play anywhere near 3, but I think it's pretty low opportunity cost to play 1 because it's so good in certain spots, and to max out after sideboarding, you know what I mean? I know that in the coming weeks, like when my testing group where I am and me are doing proxy testing, we're going to be doing a lot of what we like to call proof of concept lists, where we're trying to basically find something that's good, and then we'll scale it up and down the spectrum to see how much we actually want in our decks. So we're going to start with 3 Belligerents in these decks and see how good it is. And if it really is that it's just so bad to draw in so many spots, we'll just start to cut them and move them to the sideboard. But I know for a fact that in anything that's like a blue thrust mirror, this card is basically just taking an extra turn or maybe more. It's insanity. And great art.
And great art, yeah.
That is one Mad Fortress Maximus on there.
Yeah,
mm-hmm,
yeah.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. You can tell by the knee cannons. That's how I identified it. I know I'm not the lore master, Kent, but I think, unless you guys want to, talk any more about the insanity that is belligerence, that concludes our previews for the week. We did cover earlier that, like the last piece of news, is that they are doing 6 super rare characters in this set, which is pretty dope. And I don't know what that means. Like, I know it's going to be like higher frequency or better distribution, but I don't know what that means for like how many characters are going to be. I'm wondering if they're going to do like a Titan Master that is a 2-part super rare.
I hope not. I hope they're all like regular bot-sized characters or bodies or whatever. But they did say that the pull rate is now 1 out of every 30 packs. So I believe you're guaranteed 1 out of every box that you buy, which is very cool. Something that Magic has done for forever, it seems like, at this point with their mythic rares. So I'm glad to see that happening with Transformers.
Hi, and Joel, you guys got any more closing thoughts before I kind of take us through the outro?
Windsweeper. Really love them. That's all I got.
I want to thank you guys for listening to our first podcast. I hope that we can bring y'all all sorts of great content, and tune in because you're going to get all of our thoughts on all of these cards, and it's going to be a lot of fun bringing it to you. So thank you for listening. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, we will revisit the earlier previews once like the full spoiler comes out, so that we have like more context to apply towards the coming metagame. And as far as kind of like a couple of points for upkeep goes, we want to take some viewer questions at the end of these normally. We don't have any from this episode since we're just starting off. In the future, we'd love to address your questions. So just comment on either the YouTube video that this will be in, or you can find it on the inevitable Facebook post within the Transformers group. But that ought to do it for us for episode 1. Thanks to everyone out there for listening. To echo what Joel just said, make sure to like and subscribe. Make sure to comment any questions you want us to answer for the next episode. And until next time, clear eyes, flip bots, can't lose.